A first-half hat-trick for Sam Kerr.
Hello and welcome to Offsiders. The NRL and AFL have exited stage left and right, and football has its chance to take Australian sports centre stage. The Socceroos play another crucial World Cup qualifier on Tuesday, and the A-League kicked off over the weekend. Melbourne City started with a bang, and last year's wooden spooner Newcastle put away 5 goals against the Mariners. But the big question is, can anyone get near Sydney FC?
Season 13 in the Hyundai A-League is underway. Bratton just whips it in first time. Scooping at the back post. Kamau! Bruce Kamau, just 1 goal all of last season, as the first goal in this entire A-League season. Uses Fitzgerald. Cut back. Kamau! He's got a double! Drew Naboo. Jets in control at the moment. O'Donovan! Oh, what a header! He has the hat-trick this time. Take a second. Dini Petratos has got his goal. And it is 5 for Newcastle. Finding space. Good-looking cross. Brosk! Home goal! Thomas Dean, not the homecoming he was after. Graham Arnold's title defence off to the perfect start. A win against the fierce rivals, the Melbourne Victory.
Good morning, I'm Paul Kennedy, and we'll start with Francis Leach. Francis, what did you make of Sydney FC?
Yeah, they were pretty good last night, but I thought Victory were good value as well. Probably unlucky not to get an equaliser. Actually, the quality of the game was really quite entertaining, which is good news for the A-League. The product itself, as it's presented in the first round, has been right up there. It's improving incrementally year on year, and if there's more football like that, we're in for a good season. I know there's a lot of structural issues around the game that have been stalking the game and its future, but I think the product itself is not too bad. And Roy O'Donovan going back to Central Coast in Gosford yesterday and scoring 3 against his old team in his first hit out for Ernie Merrick's team was another great storyline out of the weekend, PK.
Plenty of hope for that club this year. Now, Richard, is the A-League well placed, in good shape to take over straight after the AFL and NRL?
It's always going to be a slow burn. I mean, it was interesting you say, you know, the NRL and AFL have exited stage left, but they never really do, particularly the AFL with their 24/7, 365 total, you know, media oxygen suck that they're very good at doing. You know, it's always going to be a slow burn. I thought they were reasonable crowds last night. 24,000 for the Big Blue at Etihad, and a really entertaining game. I think I saw more good football in that than I saw in the Socceroos Serie A during the week. It was, you know, up and down. I felt sorry for poor old Thomas Deng, whose first A-League goal's an own goal to lose a Big Blue. That's not a great way to get on the score sheet. Generally, though, I think the league is, you know, it's well placed in terms of the product it's putting out. It's the visibility. It's going to be really interesting to see the viewing figures for the first night on One, who, you know, they're using the Fox coverage but transferring it to free-to-air TV. SBS did that and buried it. So that's going to be the first significant indicator of whether it's going to get a little bit more traction this season.
There was an unusual discussion before that Big Blue, and that is the two coaches deciding and discussing whether or not they should actually be playing it at the time while the Socceroos are still trying to qualify for the World Cup. Let's hear from Kevin Muscat now.
We're not supporting, in my view, stopping football in the international window or making comments that don't support it are archaic and has held the game back. And continual comments like it will keep the game where it is.
Kim, what do you think? He did have 3 players missing for that opening match.
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was quite the soap opera to raise a bit of excitement in the lead up to the game. I think, you know, 2 former Socceroos teammates. You know, Arnold threw out there that he reckons, you know, it's Muscat's fault for recruiting internationals. Makes you wonder about the future of the game. I mean, they really want to raise the standard. You love having those big-name players out there. I agree. I thought Victory did an exceptional job. Deng actually played really well, other than that slip. But, you know, it does really build something of a rivalry between those clubs.
There's a bit of comic book stuff between those two. Yeah, it was interesting seeing them in the technical area during the game. They're like 2 caged lions. You know? There's the A-League have brought in a new rule this year where coaches can be carded.
I think
and I think there's a real competition going on.
Yeah.
Kevin Muscat's $1.05, but Arnie's a chance to be the big outsider coming down the outside.
There's another byplay to this as well, is that Ange Postecoglou's made it quite clear that this World Cup campaign, whether it finishes on Tuesday night against Syria or maybe later on in the qualification phase against Panama or in Russia, is his last. And these two blokes want a shot at that top job. So I think there's an element of that there, that they're both trying to assert their primacy as the coach in the A-League that should be the next Socceroos coach. So I don't underestimate how important that is to both of those gentlemen. Yeah. But Graham Arnold, to his credit, he has taken on board, he understands that the A-League does need a different way to break through the glass ceiling of media coverage, and by being a bit of a provocateur has been his way. I think he's playing a little bit of WWE-style trash talk in order to do that, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Francis, just tell us, if you can, in a snapshot, if it's possible, the FIFA versus the FFA, the control of the game in Australia, and what's happening now.
Yeah, this is still coming down the pipe in the next month or so, November. There's a standoff. It remains unresolved at the board level for the FFA and how many seats around the table. So the A-League club at the moment have one representative on a board, I think, of 10 who determine the future of the A-League, of football in Australia. They want greater representation. They've tried to broker a deal. It hasn't worked out. The standoff has been being watched from Zurich. They have warned the FFA that they're prepared to put in what's called a normalisation committee to take over the running of the game, to put in the administrative changes they believe are necessary. And it seems we are inevitably heading towards that because the parties just cannot come to terms.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say, interesting backdrop to it. 2023 Women's World Cup bid. Federal government have come out and said that, FFA, if you can't get your ducks in a row, that $4 million of funding that's been on the table will be taken off. And there are obviously other considerations around FIFA's own governance, whether FIFA can actually be trusted to run a transparent bid process. But it's a pretty intriguing situation where you've got, all the club chiefs are men, all the state federation chiefs are men, essentially got the fate of women's football in their hands.
And the best thing about Australian football at the moment is the
absolutely,
Matildas.
the brilliant Matildas.
So you wouldn't want to get in the way of that. And Richard, you've written about this too, with all the problems that football is contending with, or challenges at least. The Matildas are the shining light. If only every team could have a Sam Kerr.
Absolutely. she's everything that the game needs. Someone who's just vibrant and fun. And it's interesting that Newcastle A-League team did well. They took it to Newcastle, which is a great old football area, and really set the place alight. And I reckon the vibe about football there would be really good on the back of them and now Newcastle Jets, and that's what the game needs. With this whole governance issue, the interesting thing is the state's sitting between these two, between the clubs and the FFA, and they've got to decide which one is best for the future of the game. Is the FFA underperforming, or would the clubs suck all the money out of the game and leave none for the grassroots? So it's a really difficult decision they're having to make, and I know they're canvassing a lot of opinions about that.
And there are wider issues that sit underneath all of this, and part of it's the cost of participation in the sport, the role of the National Premier League in terms of setting up elite pathways. Is that locking out other people from different circumstances who don't have the money to be in an NPL club? We have the curriculum that underpins the game, which has been in place for a decade now. Do we only want to play one style of football? Is that the right way to generate a competition of ideas to produce our best teams? Is this Socceroos team a product of that? If it doesn't qualify, what will be the ramifications? It's all coming to a head.
Yeah, that brings us to Tuesday night. What a big night that's become now.
Is Australia well placed to go through to the next stage and probably play against Panama?
I would have thought so, on the back of 1-1 away goal. But having seen the way they played, the last 30 minutes of that game was really disturbing in terms of they were trying to play their style, trying to play the ball out and just continually turning it over and putting themselves under pressure. They wouldn't want to give easy chances up like that again. I think, in some ways, I know the penalty was contentious, but they were almost lucky to get away with a result in the end.
Yeah, look, Syria really stick in there. They're playing it right out to the end, and it's, think back, I remember being, a bit younger than I am now, but, the last time we were in this situation, we really can't be complacent. I think, so important to play out the whole game.
It's nerve-wracking, isn't it? Just watching every step's nerve-wracking.
It's become